when the dark clouds roll away, and the sun begins to shine, I see my freedom from across the way, and it comes right in on time. Well, it shines so bright, and it gives so much light, and it comes from the sky above. Make me feel so free, make me feel like me, and it lights my life with love. And it seems like, and it feels like.
So, Honey Bushu, Bimsquishet Chichak Dishnakas, Makwadodam, Wiikwemkoong Unceded Territory, Lynda Trudeau, Jaganashi Noswin, the manager, general manager, Nucky. I welcome you from Mantoulin Island. I'm here in Ontario, in the Great Lakes. So Mantoulin Island is located in Lake Huron, and so we're I guess the Great Lakes are centered in the heart of Turtle Island, and it's such a pleasure to join with you today across the lands, even though we're still close together and in the in what we would consider as part of the Turtle region, I guess. We're still close together here, but we're unfortunately we're not that close that we can be together in person. So I'm really grateful to see you all. I introduce myself in my language. I am Anishinaabekwe. That means I am Anishinaabe. I'm Odawa. I come from the people who were originally traders of the Three Fires Confederacy, which was the Potawatomi and the Ojibwa people. And I guess that's been true and true. So I've always been interested in business. To me, business made a lot of sense. It provided people with goods and services, and it also provided people with an opportunity to recognize some of their own assets and be able to, sustain themselves that way. Sorry, I'm just switching through here. So, in terms of professionalism, I've earned a degree in business. I also earned a bachelor's degree in business administration, and I went on to pursue a master's of education, and currently I'm pursuing a master of fine arts. I work at Debajehmujia Theatre Group as a general manager. Again, administration is part of my background. My mom was a residential school survivor. She worked in administration for our local government, first for the Department of Indian Affairs and then for a local tribal organization. And my dad was a mechanic, so he worked with with people in our community. I didn't have grandparents on my mother's side. Well, I did, but my mom's mother wasn't always present. So I grew up with my dad's parents in my life daily, and I guess was introduced to some of the language and the culture through them. I have been married for 28 years. I have one son who is 19, going on 20 this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more. I am so curious a little bit, and I know our listeners might want to hear a little bit more about Mantoulin Island, because what we hear is that that it is a sacred site and is occupied by a majority of Native peoples. Could you speak a little bit more about your homeland there?
Yeah, sure. I Uh, I lived on reserve all my life, and for me, that just indicates to me that when I look out my window, I can still uh, have access to lands that my ancestors had access to. And so on Manitoulin Island, there's seven reserves, and we're all Anishinaabe. So by the Indian Act, we've been broken up into these parcels of land. And so there's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here. Manitoulin Island was, uh, um, I guess, identified as a place after the War of 1812 that all the Indians east of the Mississippi were going to be relocated to. And when that didn't work out, then they opened up Manitoulin Island for settlement. And so then we started getting non-Indigenous people here. The original name of Manitoulin Island, or in the language, it's Nido Nissin. So it's the home of the Great Spirit, or the island of the Great Spirit, which also used to historically be called Odawa Minis and Gima Minis, which is where story has it that, or history has it that um, people from Anishinaabe territory, which was a large territory at one time, they would come and bring their headsmen to or headswomen to when they passed to lay to rest on the cliffs out here.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's probably where some of the understanding and recognition of the spiritual component is.
Mm-hmm.
But also, we have we've been able to maintain some sense of sovereignty here in Wiikwemkoong. We are considered unceded, so we didn't sign into the I think it was the 1862 treaty. So Wiikwemkoong and the people here, the Odawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwa people have felt that they've maintained their sovereignty despite the government infusion, I guess, of policies, but also supports after we were designed to live on reserve.
Mm-hmm. You told me once on the phone that the people, because you have maintained your residency there, that the language is learned by everyone, and it's the first language that you learn. It's also taught in the schools. And can you talk a little bit more about the language and how that relates to community and sovereignty, really? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what part might have been missed is that that's the intention of language to be the first language, through colonization and just the society, we turn on a TV, we are speaking here together, using English. And so I didn't grow up fluent. I'm not a speaker, but I grew up around it. My parents and my grandparents and other people spoke it, but people my age primarily didn't. And people younger than me, like my son, hasn't grown up with hearing language in his home in the same way that I did or my husband did. And so, what we know, we try to utilize with him as much as possible. In my community here, they've really put forward efforts to revitalize language. Just yesterday, they graduated a cohort. I think there might have been about 15 people, language speakers from our community. That's their fourth cohort. Our education system also changed. They said, people don't have to meet the Ontario teacher certification to be language speakers and language teachers here. And so that's who they hire to teach language in the classrooms. We have a language nest where there's only Anishinaabe spoken, and people who are there as babies will come there with their parents to learn how to speak the language and be language speakers.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's
It
really,
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so supportive, and I'm sure that it also increases everyone's knowledge of the culture and cultural practices. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about how, community moves forward together into the cultural practices.
Well, I can share some of my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
I can I shared I grew up with my grandparents. So my grandmother was a crafts person. She would do quill work and beadwork, make regalia. She was part of the Pow Wow. The Pow Wow, wasn't in our community, I think, until 1960 something. And so uh, she went with a group of ladies out west to Saskatchewan to go and learn some of the traditions and brought it back home to us. So we are one of the oldest powwows in Ontario that is still celebrating. We're going on to 60 years or 61 years this year. So I grew up with that, and I grew up with my grandfather, learning being on the land. I remember at times we would drop him off and he would just have a little pack sack. And we'd pick him up days later, and he would sustain himself through the land. So whatever he was eating and drinking, like cedar teas and or bark tea and all these different kinds of things, he knew how to do those kinds of things. I didn't learn how to do those things, but I witnessed it. And so it wasn't until my parents separated, my mom remarried, and so my stepfather introduced us to the rain dance. And so that's what I'm more familiar with. And after I went to school in 2010, I went to school in Michigan, and that school was promoting free enterprise, and free enterprise was identifying some of the government policies that are in place that don't allow businesses to, not just the businesses, but also the communities and the people to benefit greatly on whatever the prices may be for whatever goods and services that they can identify that. But with government involvement in business, there was a little bit of challenges there. So I understood this in the way of, being an Anishinaabe person and living on reserve and being prescribed things by the government on our reserve, even though the government doesn't live here. And so, really looking at the biodiversity, things like blood quantum letters, identifying who was with species of man. So those kinds of things really opened my eyes to just a cultural richness in terms of who we are as Anishinaabe people. So I came back to my community and I worked in our governance, and my task was to ratify our own constitution. So that happened in 2014. We have our own lawmaking authority, our own government. We have a after we approved the community approved the constitution. I really looked at it and wondered, in our government, where is our culture? Where is the tobacco at the heart of things? Where is the pipes at the heart of things? Where are our drums and our songs? And so I needed to look for a way to figure out how I could infuse that in our work. Because if we want to be an Indigenous led place, how are we leading it with our culture and some of our language? And so I stopped working with the band, and I eventually moved over to a theater company. And for me, that's where a lot of that richness is, because, it talks about our stories. The organization that I moved to was grounded in a 14,000-year history through the Odawa Medewan Foundation teachings. So the values and principles were very much rooted in terms of who we were as Anishinaabe people. And so utilizing that process that's already there, it's like a historical process, and trying to figure out how it is that we can, have tell richer stories utilizing the culture. How can we take a look at our history, where we are today, and look at the future, and how is it that we want to be um, prescribing, I guess, some of the future and some of the information that we're sharing and leaving. And so I think culture is very important in terms of um, not just that revitalization, but also that bridging divides between, myself and my ancestors,
Mhm.
my son and his ancestors, our community and generations, and even non-Indigenous people. So like I think it's really important, and I think um, after I don't know if it was after Idle No More mostly, but there's just a resurgence of people reclaiming their identity of who they are as
Mhm.
Anishinaabe people, and really moving forward and helping advance that cultural aspect of our ways of being and our daily living.
That's beautiful. Lynda, I wanted to ask you if was there a story or a certain song that kind of inspired you to, keep digging into the roots of your culture and working in the way that you do? I mean,
That's a really, really good question, and it's not something I really thought about. I think um, when when I think about reestablishing with culture and identity, I think about growing up and not even knowing what kind of Indian I was, or
Mhm.
what kind of language was being spoken. Like I could hear it, I just didn't really know what it was. And it wasn't until I started seeing some things in ceremony that I recognized some of the practices that my grandparents would do. Like they would feed the ancestors when we had meals, or my grandfather would smoke tobacco during Pow Wow weekend, or we would be out in the bush at times, and then he would be praying in all the directions and stuff like that. So I can't really say if there was a song or anything, but I do know that I think after I went to school, thinking about sustainability, like I said, I do business. I do administration. I understand that. I also went to school and learned more about sustaining the environment. And then with that was also some of the culture. And I do a lot of community volunteerism. So I saw this as just um, three pieces of the pie. I needed the fourth piece, and culture was definitely part of that. So when I moved to Debajehmujia Theatre Group, I moved there because they had um, a land sustainability department, and I didn't see that locally. I didn't see anybody taking action for recognizing the importance of our land
Mhm.
and and our society as we live here in this world. So I really wanted to work with a place that was on the forefront of that locally. While I was there, I just happened to be further enriched in the cultural components. So I think it's just a natural progression, that it just feels like one day I've been awake all this time. Um, but in reality, it took a lot, it took a lot of days to get to this point, and really looking at that holistic component to make sure that culture was also included with those,
Mhm.
the economy and the environment and our society.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to dig a little bit deeper into myself to figure out what really was that trigger point, because that's a really good question. I don't know where that I can't answer where that formative experience came from.
hmm Because you talk about the language being taught in the schools, and I'm wondering if you see the reaction through education in the schools with young people, and is it different from what your experience was, and is it, more enriched because they are learning the language?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. When I went to school, we had language, I think maybe once a week, about 20 minutes. And it was mostly just numbers, animals, nothing to really have a conversation with. My son, when he went to school, he started learning the language at school as well. And it was more, it allowed him more to have a little bit more of a conversation compared to what I had experienced. Seeing some of the children today and knowing some of the language speakers that are within the school system, absolutely, it's really um, enriching in terms of how they're utilizing the language as part of daily practice and also action. Because I think with the
hmm
language, it's not just what you see and what you say, but it's also what you hear, not just with your ears and your mind, but also in your heart.
hmm hmm Yeah. You mentioned Idle No More, and of course, that was like a lot of action,
Yeah.
and really encouraging. You also are developing um, your thesis on funeral practices, and I was wondering if you might want to share some of that. What would be acceptable to, uh, to hear about with our listeners today, a lot being non-native, but I think that they honor and appreciate um, cultural practices. Um,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
particularly because where you live is such a sacred site, and that it is including a lot of burial sites. So, um, I think
Yeah,
I'd be honored to hear a little bit more about that.
for sure. I had an experience when my grandmother passed away in 1994. And the Jesuits came into our community in the 1600s. And primarily growing up, our community was Roman Catholic. And and I think like Indigenous people in Canada weren't considered Indigenous or Indians until 1951. So that's not too long ago.
Mhm.
And so I think by the time I was born and growing up, like there was a lot of um uh there wasn't a lot of um sharing in terms of who we were and how we were doing things as Anishinaabe people. So when my grandmother passed away in 1994, um uh, we as a family we were making braids, we were my uncles sang, and so the only place to have her wake was in a church, which is where, that was fairly common for people. And she happened to pass away on a Friday, so when or maybe they brought her on a Friday, but anyway, she was there on a Sunday, and Sunday they were ready to have service, and the priest came along at the time and said that it wasn't acceptable to have a casket during service present. So they closed a casket and they wanted to wheel her outside to wait for service to be done. So that's triggering, and at the same time, it gives you a sense of respect in terms of some of the indigenous ways of being, because during that period of time when she was outside, and there was a powwow going on in the neighboring community, and they were doing an honor song for her during that period of
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just, like I just feel like that the uh, spirit works in very beautiful ways. And so we didn't know that right away. So like we were shocked and feeling disrespected, I guess, and feeling like we failed my grandmother because, she was wheeled outside. But hearing later on about this, ceremony occurring for her later, just again reiterated just how beautiful uh, that ways of
Mm-hmm.
being are.
Mm-hmm.
So later on, as I got older, I've had the privilege of being with a lot of people who have passed. And for the most part, they're palliative care, and it's a very loving environment, and
Mm-hmm.
you get to see things like you get to see them talking about people who have passed away already, and that they're
Mm-hmm.
coming to visit, or they're coming to get them, or that they know what day they're going to pass away. This is when they can, and they do. And so I after my father and my stepfather passed away. And because he was from the Rain Dance Society, uh, he was cremated, and we had a sacred fire right away. And so after we went through that process, and just it allowed us a really a gentle way of processing grief.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it also introduced me to a new way of understanding how we can take care of our loved ones. And so gathering as community, feasting, telling stories, sharing, supporting family members, like that's such a beautiful, beautiful way of doing things. And so as uh, as as more and more people started understanding, I think it might have been Idle No More, just reintroducing some cultural aspects. So you see it a little bit more in our community, not as much yet. But I I feel like um, if I can share some of this ways of being with people, especially as I've had the privilege of being with people as their and families as their loved ones are passing, or my own loved ones are passing, it just helps doing that caretaking of our loved one in
Mm-hmm.
a way that, we believe is the proper way to do it, but also that caretaking of those who are left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the steps that they can they can utilize so that they're not stuck in that in a state of grief, but that there's some periods to help, or there's some steps to help move them from that uh, period of grief to, their new changed world when they don't have no longer have their loved ones with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do our station ID because it's the top of the hour and we're live radio and that's what we need to
Okay.
do. You are listening to WZNC LP Bethlehem. This is World Harmony. My name is Deb and I'm also here with Carolyn.
Yes.
Carolyn's going to tell us where we are.
North Country
Community.
Radio.
and we're also online at
North Country
Community
Radio.
.org. Thank you all for listening today to our guest. Lynda Trudeau is talking to us from Manitoulin Island, and she is an Anishinaabekwe. I maybe didn't say that quite right. And we've been talking about community, her work in the community, and also the culture and how that sharing of culture happens in through education, through language. She's also working with a theater group. It's just been wonderful to talk to you. We have probably just 9 minutes left here on our Zoom. Um, so is there a topic that we need to talk about that you have on your heart that you would like to share with our listeners today?
I just wanted to share. I actually one song that I utilized when I was helping with community consultation for our Chinoknagewin, and again too, it was again looking at our cultural and traditional ways of governance, and so one song that really stuck with me during that period of time was by Queen, "I Want to Break Free." And so that's what it
Yeah,
felt like. I want to break free of
yeah,
this
yeah.
government policies and this government claws that were digging deep into us and allow us to, be these uh, to do the healing, and then
Mhm.
to be the people that we're intended to be. I think one of the things that sit most with me is just just the beauty of art,
Mhm.
because it is a cultural component, and I didn't realize how important it was until I uh immersed myself in the administration of the art. I used to be on the board of directors with the theater company for 7 years, and I was no longer there. And then when this job opened up, I became involved as the general manager, and just really seeing just the impacts that art has within our communities,
Mhm.
and also the opportunities that art can do to develop a more healthy future. But also it can show us, it's like a mirror, and sometimes we don't like what we see, and it's up to us to decide how to change that. But yeah, I think I found where I feel rich. I feel loved.
Mhm.
I feel whole. Working in the arts. I'm not an artist. I can do some work, but that's not how I would dedicate my life. But mine is to support people who need the ways to do that. So we don't turn artists into administrators.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's really beautiful that you did find that that is where you shine and, where your talent is. And it's your gift, really, that to give back to the community. And it sounds like you're just like living, your gift. And that's a beautiful way. I really appreciate what you shared with us today. And, I don't know if, in the future we could again network with you and maybe hear from those that inspired you to continue
Yes.
on the path that you're walking right now. How does that happen? And is it that become part of ceremonies in a good way? And um, we are in the heart of the Western Abenaki traditional ancestral territory where we broadcast from, and we always acknowledge that. Um, Carolyn, who's with me today, is a descendant of those people. And I think in a way, you might be cousins because it's such a similar story. And there are some old stories that blend these peoples together. And so,
Absolutely.
I have this curiosity, and also I think our listeners would be honored to hear some of those. Intersections, maybe we can call it, where, these peoples come together and share a very similar story and culture. Um,
Absolutely. And I think about your previous or one of your previous guests who when we spoke, we talked about Nodin.
oh,
And
yes.
it was through the working with the multi-arts company, our theater company, and how I had the privilege of meeting him and just spending time with sharing, and I guess just igniting, keeping spirit ignited.
Yes, yes. And walking life in a certain way, making that commitment to whether it be, the ancestors or, ceremony or your community, it's making that commitment to be walking in a certain way, and that's really beautiful, and what we try to share here on this radio show. Because, it's not anywhere else. Where can you go for it,
That's
And
right.
we enjoy also playing music and talking to the musicians who are so inspired by Mother Earth, of course, and the healing that music can bring. And I think you touched on
Yeah.
that with the theater work and storytelling. And we only have a couple more minutes, but so I want you to take your time with your closing comments here today, and I truly welcome you back in the future.
Thank you
Lynda
so much.
Trudeau, it's just been really an honor.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for the time and reaching out and providing me with this opportunity. It is a real privilege. Thank people who are listening and will be listening in the maybe on a backtrack, and allowing me the opportunity to share some of the things that I've had experience too. I look forward to our paths crossing, whether it's in this world or the next. But I look forward to that, and hearing and seeing from other people will be just it's like icing on the cake. It's delicious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Because I think just knowing there are others who think in similar ways and participate in life in similar ways is really encouraging.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that we vitalization of identity and spirit, and I think just makes us a better world. There's former National Grand Chief over Nerkity spoke about people having the right to belong and the right to be different.
Mhm.
And what a beautiful world we will have when we just accept people as they are without expectations, and value that gift of human being and life that they bring.
Thank you so much for your words today. Truly, you are an inspiration. Thank you for walking the way you walk and sharing with us on the radio today. We're really honored to meet you. So, until our paths cross again, thank you.
Yes, Mama P co-opman. So that means until we see each other again.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll say goodbye.
Okay. Bye, Deb. Bye, Carolyn.
Thank
you. Pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Keep in touch.
Yes, indeed. All right. Bye now.
Thank you. Regret.